The wedding was supposed to be perfect, until the priest read a text that froze everyone in place. No one knew why he looked so shaken, until he cleared his throat. The groom's secret was seconds away from being exposed. And then, someone walked in. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who carried more than just a broken heart. By the end of the ceremony, nothing about this wedding would ever be the same. Aisha and Daniel fit the kind of couple that made neighbors smile. They weren't flashy, they were small, persistent, the sort that built a life out of ordinary gestures. They met at a charity drive, Aisha behind a clipboard, Daniel hauling boxes, and somewhere between spilled coffee and shared laughter something practical and tender took hold. Dates evolved into routines, into an apartment with mismatched mugs, into quiet Sunday mornings that felt like a promise. When Daniel slipped a ring beneath a stack of takeout menus, the engagement felt like the natural next page. Friends toasted, plans were made, and Aisha sketched floral colors while Daniel rehearsed his vows. No one expected secrets. Yet people are longer than the versions they present, and histories can have corners you forget to sweep. 3 years before the engagement, Daniel had been in a relationship with Maya. Their ending, as people described it afterward, sounded mutual, a clean separation blamed on moving for work, on late nights and patience worn thin. But the truth of breakups is often messy, attachments leave traces. Maya kept small things, a sweater that smelled faintly of him, a saved message, a wounded pride that made her linger in the same circles. In the months before the wedding, Daniel's behavior was small and telling. Private texts deleted minutes after being written, moments when he stepped outside to take a call and returned quiet enough to alarm those watching, and a half-smile that belonged to memory rather than the present. A bridesmaid later admitted she had seen him speaking with Maya at a cafe 2 months earlier, the meeting brief, faces serious, parting like people who had unfinished business but claimed otherwise. Rumor in a town is less malicious than efficient, it simply collects facts and fills the gaps with what people want to know. Someone, perhaps trying to be helpful, found a screenshot in a shared cloud backup, a single message from an unknown date that read, "I'm scared, I think I might be pregnant." The screenshot stood alone, lacking timestamps and context. In the week before the ceremony, that single line acquired momentum as people tried to make sense of it. Aisha tried to be practical. She asked Daniel, directly and quietly, if there was anything he needed to tell her from his past. He gave a short, protective answer, "No, nothing that matters now." She took him at his word. Love, at its hardest, often rests on that kind of faith. 2 nights before the ceremony, an email arrived in a cousin's inbox with a compact file attached, Maya's name in the header and a narrow ultrasound strip plus a clinic receipt dated 8 weeks earlier. The cousin, alarmed, forwarded it to Daniel with only the note, "You need to see this." Daniel went white, put the phone down, and promised to manage it privately. He did not tell Aisha. On the morning of the wedding, a bridesmaid pulled Aisha aside to whisper that someone had been seen at the church's back door. Aisha steadied herself and breathed. When the woman pushed through the door into the light, carrying her coat tightly around something beneath, the room's rhythm changed. The woman's steps were certain, not wild, not pleading, simply resolved. She moved down the aisle toward Daniel and Aisha as if a straight line had always led her here. No one expected the fallout. If you're hooked and want the rest, like and subscribe. The next moments will stop the ceremony and force every secret into the open. When the woman reached the front, she did not collapse and she did not recite a list of accusations. She folded back her coat with a steady hand and revealed the things she could not keep private any longer: an ultrasound strip, a folded clinic slip, the small, undeniable proof of a life forming. "This is why I'm here," she said. Her voice was measured, not theatrical, but the words landed like stones in a quiet pond. Heads lifted, smiles lost their grip. The organ's cord seemed to stretch thin, as if the building itself inhaled and waited. Daniel's face sank, Aisha's breath shortened as if she had been winded. The aisle swelled with a soft, involuntary chorus of intake. Someone reached instinctively toward the woman, an usher, a cousin, but she stepped past the polite intervention. She had not come to be soothed. She said plainly, "I'm 8 weeks. I told him privately." I asked for honesty. I asked for a choice. Her eyes found Daniel and fixed him like a witness. A hush reeled through the pews that had been full of expectation. Phones appeared as if on cue, not to sensationalize but because modern crowds reach for objects that anchor them to fact. Whispers threaded through the church, someone asked about dates, someone else bent to comfort a toddler who had sensed the change and started to fuss. Daniel's first words were a rush, a scatter of denials and then a clumsy attempt at clarity. He spoke about a past he thought he had closed, about messages he had deleted, about fear and cowardice, and about a promise he had failed to make lovingly clear. His sentences tried to reshape what had happened into something smaller, something manageable, but they only pulled at the seams of trust. Aisha, whose composure had been a practiced armor, wavered in measured pulses. Her hands, which had held the bouquet like a talisman, tightened until petals sighed. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Why would you let her come here?" Her voice was steady enough to cut through excuses, an accuracy that left people listening like jurors hearing their first piece of evidence. The woman, who had chosen this public doorway after nights of second-guessing, described how she'd tried to reach Daniel and been met with pauses and deletions. She told how she had sat with the decision, how she had weighed the shame of a scene against the need to ensure the child's future, how she eventually put one foot in front of another and drove to the church. She said nothing to shame the bride. She spoke instead to the men and women who had gathered, asking simply that they see the truth she held. Arguments flickered at the edges of ceremony. A cousin muttered that this was no place, a voice demanded Daniel be honest now, a woman suggested they talk privately. The officiant stayed planted at the front, his role suddenly awkward between pastoral care and witness. As Aisha searched Daniel's face for a single reason she could understand, someone from the groom's side moved forward with a white-knuckled grip on a phone. The cousin's eyes were fixed, fearful and resolute. He held the device like a loaded object. The aisle, which a moment before had felt impossibly long, condensed into the small space between that phone and the priest's hand. The room leaned forward. The next moment held its breath. The cousin's hand shook as he stepped forward and placed the phone in the pastor's palm. The priest glanced down, then lifted his eyes, weighing the moment in a silence that felt like a coin flip. "Because these messages touch the truth of what you are about to promise," he said, "I will read a short excerpt." He read slowly and clearly. The first line was plain: "I'm scared, I think I might be pregnant." A quiet gasp ran through the room. He read the second line: "Please don't tell anyone yet." Those words, once private, rang like a judgment in the sanctuary. Reactions came in small violent bursts, a hand to a mouth, a child's cry, the shuffle of a shoe. The groom went pale, the bride's fingers closed on her bouquet until petals whispered. The priest set the phone down, shifted from officiant to witness. A murmur rose: should the wedding continue? Some guests implored calm, others demanded answers. Daniel's voice arrived thin and fast. He said he had been confused, that messages had passed in a space he regretted, that fear had made him ask for privacy rather than take responsibility. His sentences, meant to contain the rupture, instead revealed how much he had tried to hold inside. Aisha's questions were precise and sharp. "Did you ask her to keep this quiet?" she demanded. "Did you know and still plan to marry me?" The bride's voice was quiet but edged with steel. Around them people watched, some angered, some pitying, all breath held. The pregnant woman, Maya, answered with calm that suggested she had prepared for judgment. She said she had reached out earlier and been met with deletions and pauses, she had tried to speak in private and felt ignored. She had come not to ruin a day but to force a reckoning she no longer trusted would happen behind closed doors. The priest proposed a recess and a private conversation. A small cluster of family formed near the altar, the rest of the congregation hovered at the edge, faces taut. In that private circle Daniel's defenses came apart. He admitted he had been told of a possible pregnancy weeks before. He admitted that fear of losing a life he was forging with Aisha, fear of responsibility, had driven him to ask for silence rather than the hard work of truth. Tears came, messy and unpunctuated, and he apologized for his cowardice. Aisha catalogued each admission with a controlled intensity, asking for dates, for messages, for clarity about intentions. The pregnant woman answered plainly, she had not sought charity, she had sought acknowledgement and a commitment to the child's welfare. The priest listened, then the priest said plainly, under these circumstances I cannot, in good conscience, perform the marriage vows now. The sentence landed like a bell. Some relatives sighed, others protested. Some guests tried to regroup the day into a plan, private talks, statements to be made later, decisions to be deferred. For the couple the altar became a crossroads, one path demanded immediate honesty and responsibility, another promised the slow disintegration of trust if vows were made despite the unresolved truth. In the hush that followed, the church felt smaller and more intimate than it had 10 minutes earlier. The day had shifted from celebration to a moral decision point. Outside, cars passed, but within the sanctuary a rupture had been exposed and, for the first time that day, people watched to see whether it would be mended or left to fall apart. Everyone waited in silence. The church emptied in a different mood. Guests drifted away in small groups, some consoling, some silent. The bouquet sat abandoned on a pew. Aisha stepped outside, the veil half loosened, Daniel followed. On the church steps they spoke with the brittle honesty that time sometimes forces. He explained, admitting he had known of a possible pregnancy weeks earlier and that fear had made him ask for silence instead of choosing truth. He apologized, his words were raw but could not erase the choice. Aisha, betrayed and measured, asked for space. She refused to make a life decision under pressure. She demanded the facts and that responsibility be accepted. They agreed to pause everything publicly and to sort the matter privately. In the days that followed there were practical steps, a paternity test arranged at a clinic, medical appointments, and private conversations with family. Lawyers were mentioned in passing by worried relatives, though no legal action was taken immediately. The town's gossip cycle slowed as verified facts replaced rumor. The woman who had come to the wedding received support from a few friends and relatives. She focused on appointments and planning, not spectacle. Daniel faced the reality of choices he had tried to postpone, parenting, accountability, and the consequences of secrecy. Aisha considered whether she could rebuild trust with someone who had withheld so much. There was no cinematic reconciliation on the church step, only difficult, adult decisions and the slow, uncertain work of consequence. Weeks later, with a paternity result pending and hearts raw, the people involved began the quieter work, meetings with counselors, discussions about custody and support, and, for some, the decision to move on. If you want an update when facts come in, subscribe and let us know which thread you want explored next.